And finally, I guess the point we would make is that we still believe we live in a dangerous world. And thankfully, the integration, the peace, the prosperity, the common market, the advances in Europe are so incredibly impressive and welcome, certainly to us. And the opportunities for European leadership in the EU are, as I said, ones that we support. But this dangerous world still requires deterrence. And we know there's a debate going on in Europe and even among some of our leading member nations about, well, what does that mean? And we would hope that there is no precipitous move made that would undermine the deterrence capability. In fact, we want to build up our deterrence through missile defense. I think making the case to publics about a lot of this is the art and responsibility of leadership. It is not easy. And in an environment in which World War II and the fall of the Berlin Wall all seem very long ago to large segments of our populations on both sides of the Atlantic. Making the case why we need to invest in deterrence, nuclear deterrence, as well as missile defense, why we need to invest in protecting our energy supplies or these new threats like violent extremism and non-proliferation from non-state actors and potentially state actors. All of that is the responsibility of leadership. And we have to do our part of it, but so do all of our other member nations, and so does NATO as an institution.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'm told we have time for one last brief question, please.
Elena Poptodorova, former ambassador of Bulgaria to the United States of America and currently Director for Security Policies at the Bulgarian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Madam Secretary, a great speech, as usual. My sense is, though, that it rests on the premise of solidarity within the alliance and on the premise of internal coherence among the members. And yet we know that there is, if not disagreement, at least differing views on Article 5, on Russia, and a few other matters. What's your sense about the level of solidarity and internal coherence? Are you comfortable with it? If not, how do you think we can achieve it? My country, as a young member of the alliance, is vitally interested, also by way of support for itself, in seeing this solidarity in full measure and in action. So I'm really looking forward to an optimistic reply from you. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Well, that certainly gives me an opening, but I am optimistic. I think that the debate that is understandable within NATO or within Europe or within the world today over the nature of the threats we face and the appropriate ways of addressing them is in large part because there's been a recognition we are in a new era. For 20 years we were in the post-Cold War era, and it was brutally interrupted by attacks, not just on New York, but on countries from Spain to the United Kingdom, as well as elsewhere in the world. And now we're seeing the impact of cyber attacks, and we worry every day about the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So we are coming to grips with the new security environment in which we find ourselves. And so there's no formula written. We're not taking it down from the shelf and saying, okay, well, here's all we have to do to adjust to it. We need to have the debate engendered by the strategic concept. And I think that you should take heart from the fact that you go back to different periods in NATO's history, there were similar debates. And nobody can say they were 100% right or that somebody else was 100% wrong, but we came together based on fundamental principles and values, a commitment to democracy, a stand against an enemy that had divided Europe, and we're not living in that world anymore. But the world in which we live in has multipolar threats to us, and we're now coming to grips with that. So I'm quite optimistic because I think that NATO itself is an adaptable organism. It is one that has, along with the European Union, demonstrated that Europe could move beyond a past that, when one thinks about it, is almost impossible to believe. I mean, I'm looking at representatives of countries that were locked in a brutal struggle during World War II. And millions and millions of Europeans from the Atlantic, into and up to Moscow were victims of that war. And yet look at where Europe is today. And I would argue that it's because of good leadership, adaptability, and organizations like NATO that help to define the debate. Many of you, like I, go to countries where they can't get over conflicts 800 years ago. And you sit there and you think, look at Europe. Look what Europe has done. Look at people sitting down with one another. That memorable event that I was privileged to participate in Berlin, walking through the Brandenburg Gate with the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so what the Atlantic Alliance has done is almost unprecedented in human history. And we should be very proud of that, and it should make us optimistic. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, and it doesn't mean that once we agree, we're going to be able smoothly to operationalize it, but history is on our side if we stay true to our principles and our values. And we will bring more and more people to that side by exemplifying that. So I am optimistic, and it's not just because you asked me a leading question. It's because I actually am. But it doesn't happen by mistake or by coincidence or accident. It happens because people like the ones in this room make it happen. And that's why I will end where I ended with my speech. The leadership crisis in the world today, particularly in democracies, and by that I mean not just elected democratic political leaders, but leaders in every institution in society, in both the public and the private sector, need to be able and willing to accept the responsibilities of leadership now. And that means doing more to explain to publics what is at stake and why this is so important. And it really means looking to bring coalitions within countries and then across countries together. But I believe that that is what we are called to do. And I'm very, very confident that we can do it. It's just that we have to make up our minds to do it. In the United States, we're always quoting Winston Churchill's comment about, democracy is the worst kind of government ever invented except for all the rest. Well, a democratic institution like NATO is not easy to run, right, Secretary General? And yet, what a tribute and triumph that it represents. So let's be resolved that we're going to build on it, come out with a strategic concept that does justice to all that came before and set the pace for what we need to be doing in the future. And the United States stands ready to be a partner in that. Thank you all.